Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Before we take up the Hindu analysis, let me wish everyone a very happy Holi. On the account of the festival, tomorrow the Hindu newspaper won't be published, and hence we won't be having the Hindu analysis for tomorrow. But however, we are going to have the daily quiz based on the reports of the Press Information Bureau. But on the account of the festival, we won't be having the Hindu analysis for tomorrow. So with this, let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at a column from page number 6 of the Delhi edition. In this column, the writer points out the various challenges that are involved in vaccine development and distribution. According to the writer, the challenges in vaccine development and distribution lies not just in research and development and the science behind it, but also on the logistics and the transparency and communication involved in the overall development and distribution process. This is one lesson that we can draw from the development and distribution process that was followed in the development of the COVID-19 vaccine by Oxford University. See, Oxford University, in association with AstraZeneca, was the first to announce a major progress in the development of a vaccine candidate for COVID-19. As soon as COVID-19 broke out in December 2019 in Wuhan, by January 2020, its genome sequence was already made available. Based on the genome sequence of the SARS coronavirus 2, a team of Oxford University researchers had immediately announced their vaccine development program, and they promised to bring out a vaccine within a span of few months. But back then, according to experts, the whole process of vaccine development and testing would take anywhere between few months to few years. But despite this traditionally long drawn out process, Oxford University researchers were able to announce with confidence that they will quickly bring out a vaccine for COVID-19. This confidence of the Oxford University team was attributed to their research and development efforts that had been initiated several months ago, even before the COVID-19 pandemic. Because this team of Oxford University researchers, they had taken a giant leap ahead in the process of vaccine development, and through cutting-edge research and development in science and technology, they were engineering the chimpanzee adenovirus strain in order to develop a common vaccine candidate that could be later customized to target multiple disease-causing pathogens. In fact, the Oxford University researchers had even tied up with the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, or CEPI, to develop a standard prototype vaccine candidate to target any possible epidemic disease of the future that they designated as Disease X. Basically, by engineering the chimpanzee adenovirus strain, they had developed a standard basic vaccine candidate which could be further customized based on the target pathogen to deal with any epidemic infectious disease. Thanks to this project, which had started several months before COVID-19, the Oxford University team had already made a lot of progress on the chimpanzee adenovirus strain. So as soon as COVID-19 broke out in China and its genome sequence became available in January 2020, the Oxford University researchers immediately jumped on the opportunity and they started customizing their vaccine candidate to make it a dedicated vaccine that could target COVID-19. So even as the WHO was announcing COVID-19 as a pandemic in March 2020, the Oxford University researchers had already announced that by October, they would already have the vaccine candidate ready for COVID-19. Now, honestly, this was quite remarkable considering how long drawn out the process of vaccine development and trials is in regular cases. As promised, by October-November 2020, the COVID-19 vaccine candidate was ready, and by December 2020, the clinical trials were also being conducted and initial trial data was being made public in order to prove and establish the safety and efficacy of the vaccine. But back then, the Oxford University researchers quickly realized that they did not have the capability to scale up the production and produce millions and billions of doses of this vaccine to meet the global demand. Because in their project, they had only developed limited production capabilities to suit the requirement of development, testing, and trials. But Oxford University on its own did not have the resources and the capabilities to scale up production and arrange for the complex logistics that were needed to produce millions and billions of doses of the vaccine in order to distribute it around the world. So, to address this shortcoming, Oxford University tied up with AstraZeneca for mass production, and it even signed contracts with the Serum Institute of India and with another pharmaceutical firm of South Korea to carry out mass production of this vaccine through transfer of technology so that the required number of vaccines could be distributed around the world in order to contain the pandemic. So, the development, testing, and distribution of this vaccine in such a short span of time was nothing short of a big success with regard to research and development and with regard to the science involved in it. But however, this vaccine of Oxford University and AstraZeneca started facing several challenges and controversies because the other crucial aspect of vaccine development and distribution, that is transparency, logistics, and communication, was completely ignored by the developers. As the vaccine was adopted by countries around the world as a part of their immunization program, these companies have faced several challenges in scaling up production, and this has already affected the timely availability of this crucial vaccine. Then, upon this, the AstraZeneca vaccine, that is known as Covishield in India, ran into several problems and controversies related to its trials because the trial data which started coming out was questioned over its efficacy and safety. In the interim trial data that was brought out by the researchers, it was shown that the vaccine was having an efficacy of just 70% with one particular age group, whereas with other groups and categories, the vaccine was showing an efficacy of 90%. Now, this huge gap in the efficacy rate was explainable through scientific data, but due to miscommunication from the researchers and the pharmaceutical companies, an unnecessary controversy was triggered, which ended up questioning the legitimacy of the vaccine itself. See, initially there was a lot of confusion about the number of doses that had to be administered in order to trigger an immune response against the SARS coronavirus 2. Initial data indicated that 2 doses spread over 4 weeks was sufficient, but later studies show that if the dose intervals were delayed, then the vaccine efficacy increases significantly. But the miscommunication of this information led to unnecessary controversies over the vaccine, which threatens not only the legitimacy of the vaccine, but also results in increased vaccine hesitancy. But by the time AstraZeneca and Oxford University could get the right message across, the damage was already done, and a similar miscommunication has been noticed with regard to its safety data as well. A few weeks ago, several adverse events were being reported, especially in European countries, after administering this vaccine. And reportedly, in certain cases, the vaccine was leading to blood clots, which could end up resulting in complications, even leading to the death of the individuals. Many such incidents were reported in European countries across Norway, Denmark, Germany, etc. And even though the link between the vaccine and the deaths were not clearly proven and established scientifically, many governments rushed to place a temporary ban on the administration of the vaccine. And the failure of the research team and AstraZeneca to communicate the right message ended up raising serious questions over the legitimacy of the vaccine and the safety of the vaccine. Eventually, as it turns out, there has been no established scientific link between this vaccine and increased cases of blood clots leading to fatal complications. And this fact has been established by the World Health Organization and as well as by the European Medicines Agency. These institutions, they kept reiterating the fact that a clear-cut scientific link was not established between the vaccine and the stray incidents of deaths that were being reported, which were arising out of blood clot-related complications. But before accurate scientific data could come out, many governments, they rushed to hold back the administration of the vaccine, thereby increasing vaccine hesitancy amongst the common people. Then in the United States as well, this vaccine candidate has run into several regulatory issues, and the US regulatory authorities have questioned that AstraZeneca and Oxford University have submitted outdated interim data and that they have failed to provide the final trial data. Now, this was again an unnecessary regulatory hurdle in the United States because the US regulatory authorities have already given approval for other vaccines developed by Moderna and Pfizer, and based on initial interim data, emergency authorization was given. But the same was denied for the AstraZeneca vaccine initially, And later, the authorities have admitted that they are yet to look at the complete data of the clinical trials. But again, such faulty communication from the regulatory authorities, from governments and companies end up affecting the image of the vaccine, thereby leading to vaccine hesitancy and reduced uptake of these vaccines amongst the people. So the writer says that these controversies and challenges that have been faced by the Oxford vaccine should be a learning lesson for governments, researchers and companies around the world. It's not just R&D and science that matters, but also it's equally important to focus on ensuring transparent communication with the public and to build up the required logistics in order to scale up production in a timely manner. Previously, it was always believed that when it comes to vaccine development and distribution, science is what really matters, as the process of development was taking months and years together, and hence a large part of the focus was solely on research and development. While this focus is extremely critical, at the same time, we cannot ignore the importance of transparency in communication and the importance of logistics, because without that, the legitimacy of the vaccine and its distribution and uptake will simply fall apart. So the COVID-19 pandemic has made us realize that transparency in communication and logistics are equally important in vaccine development, testing, and distribution, and they matter as much as the research and development and the science involved in the development of the vaccine. Next, on page number 7, we have an important column that deals with the topic of menstruation in women or periods. This is seen as a taboo subject in our society, largely because of the stigma that is associated with it. And the stigma is so severe that both women and men refuse to talk about menstruation in public, and our society at large has failed to address the outrageous practices that are carried out in our society, which emanates from our treatment of menstruation as a taboo subject. Last year in February, there was one such outrageous incident in Gujarat. In a particular girls' college, around 60 girls were forced by the college authorities to remove their undergarments to check whether they were menstruating. Now, this outrageous incident happened on the grounds that the institution had well laid out rules which were to be followed by menstruating students, and during their periods, they had been prohibited from entering the temple and the kitchen on the premises. Reportedly, a few girls violated these restrictions, and based on this violation, the college authorities had the audacity to subject these women to a humiliating check, and this shocking incident clearly highlights the stigma surrounding the subject. These shocking incidents are a direct result of the patriarchal mindset of the Indian society, and the stigma associated with menstruation is not just limited to the Indian society, but it can be seen in orthodox conservative societies around the world. Because of this stigma, a regular bodily function is treated as impure, and this leads to the branding of menstruating women as polluted women. Based on this notion of impurity, the society ostracizes menstruating women, and in several households in India, even in educated households, menstruating women are made to stay separate, and they are prohibited for 3 to 4 days from entering the kitchen or the place of worship. This barbaric practice is entirely based on the perception of the society that menstruating women are polluted and they treat menstruation blood as impure. This discrimination, which happens within our households, leads to discrimination in the society as well, in both public and private spaces. And as a result, menstruating women face several restrictions with regard to entry into temples, with regard to their participation in religious ceremonies, and they are even prohibited from entering kitchens and several public spaces as well. Now, this outrageous practice cannot be tolerated in a modern society because this patriarchal mindset is an assault on the dignity of women, on their privacy, on their right to equality, and we need to take into account the emotional impact on the mental and physical health of women due to this orthodox practice. Due to these restrictions, and due to the treatment of menstruation as a taboo subject, women have to make several uncomfortable changes to their lifestyle. And in several communities and places, it leads the women to adopt unhygienic practices, And it also leads to the reinforcement of gender based discrimination, thereby affecting the self confidence of women, as the society makes them feel that they are somehow inferior to men just because of their different bodily functions. On this important topic, the Constitution of India and the courts have a clear cut position that the stigmatization of menstruation is a direct violation of Article 14, which prohibits any discrimination on the grounds of sex. Because this discrimination of women based on the fact that they menstruate is a clear discrimination against them based on the different physiology and bodily functions of women. The act of menstruation is just another bodily function similar to eating, urinating, or excretion. While the basic hygiene and sanitation standards will have to be followed, it shouldn't result in the discrimination of women on the basis of their sex and on the basis of their different bodily and physiological functions. In this context, Justice Chandrachud has made a remarkable observation in the Sabrimala case. As you might know, the Sabrimala temple entry case is also being fought on the same subject, and as the temple prohibits menstruating women, and as the orthodox class in the society justifies this practice on various grounds, Justice Chandrachud had ruled that any social practice which excludes women from participation in public life as a result of their menstruation is discriminatory in nature on the ground of their sex. This is because it is drawn from the societal notion of menstruating women being impure. It's a notion which targets the physiological feature of being a woman. The Constitution and the higher courts have also made it clear that any restrictions on these grounds affects the right to privacy of women and as well as their right to movement, which are guaranteed fundamental rights. But despite these constitutional provisions and the clear rulings of the courts, we are yet to witness the required changes in our society. See, in a patriarchal society, where orthodox and conservative values are promoted and where superstition is made the norm, it's very difficult to bring in societal and behavioral changes. In this regard, even laws and court rulings have a limited impact, and things cannot change unless these abhorrent practices are challenged by each and every one of us in our homes and as well as in our society. Here, the writer makes a very important point that in our society and even within our own households, we have normalized all these practices. It's seen as normal to treat a menstruating woman separately within our homes, and this is what leads to the perpetuation of this practice. The only way in which the society can reform and overcome these practices is by treating these abhorrent practices as abnormal and by aggressively countering the patriarchal and orthodox mindset of the society. So, in this regard, it becomes very essential for responsible citizens to tackle the taboo and the stigma that is associated with menstruation. Next, we have an editorial on page number 6 that deals with the latest ruling of the Supreme Court on the topic of electoral bonds. But we have already covered this topic in complete detail last Friday in our explained session, and we have also covered the topic in our previous analysis. Hence, I would request you to go through this column once. Now, let's take up an article from page number 13, which provides us an important update about the ongoing violence in Myanmar. According to the United Nations, yesterday, Myanmar security forces have ruthlessly killed more than 100 peaceful protesters, including 7 children and women. In one single day, around 107 people have been killed by the security forces, and around 3,000 people have fled to Thailand, seeking refuge and political asylum in the neighboring country. This brutal violence of Myanmar security forces is a continuation of the ongoing atrocities being committed by the military junta following the military coup in Myanmar. As we have discussed in previous sessions, following the 2020 elections in Myanmar, Myanmar's military, that is often referred to as the Tatmadaw or the military junta, challenged the election victory of the NLD or the National League for Democracy, which is headed by Nobel Peace Laureate Aung San Suu Kyi. Based on allegations of electoral fraud, the military took over and declared national emergency, and it threw out the civilian government and arrested all the leaders, including Aung San Suu Kyi. For a period of 1 year, the military has assumed power to itself. And following this, pro democracy protesters and the supporters of Aung San Suu Kyi have taken to the streets to protest against Myanmar's military junta, and they have demanded the full restoration of democracy in the country. But these civilian protests have been countered by the military junta with the brutal use of force. And according to the United Nations, Myanmar security forces have killed more than 400 people in the last few weeks. Following this increase in violence, Western countries led by US and United Kingdom, Japan and Australia, they have criticized Myanmar's military, and they have called upon the military junta to follow the professional code of conduct and stop the gross violation of human rights that is going on in the country. In fact, many Western countries, including the United States, they have already cut their diplomatic ties with Myanmar, and they have already brought back sanctions against Myanmar. But this is not the first time that Myanmar is witnessing such developments, because we have seen similar incidents happening back in the 1960s, 1980s, and 1990s. Back in 1962, Myanmar's army staged the first military coup, followed by the annulment of election results in the late 1980s, which led to the house arrest of Aung San Suu Kyi. Throughout 1990s and 2000s, Myanmar's military was known for being brutal against civilians, and until 2010, the country was under military rule. Throughout this period, Western countries led by US and European countries, they had imposed sanctions against Myanmar, and eventually under the impact of these sanctions, Myanmar transitioned into a partial democracy in 2010. But the Western countries refused to acknowledge this partial transition, and they continued to impose the sanctions. Finally, in 2015, the military junta stepped aside and introduced full-fledged democracy in Myanmar. And for 5 years, between 2015 to 2020, Myanmar had a democratically elected government formed by the NLD, or the National League for Democracy. But now again, following the latest round of elections, Myanmar has fallen back into a similar loop, and this places India again in a position of dilemma. Because whenever these developments repeat in Myanmar, India is caught between two objectives. On one side, India tries to be pragmatic and protect its strategic interests in the country, but at the same time, other countries will look up to India to defend human rights and democracy in its own neighborhood. So for India, this is a conflict between ideals and pragmatism in its diplomacy. But however, over the decades, India has chosen to be very pragmatic and realistic with regard to its foreign policy towards Myanmar. And throughout the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, irrespective of the violations committed by Myanmar's military, India deliberately chose to sideline those concerns, considering how strategically important Myanmar was for India's national security. Because during this period, China was already very influential in Myanmar, and reportedly, China was using Myanmar as a base to cultivate several Northeast insurgent outfits, including the Naga groups and the ULFA. Considering how hostile countries were using Myanmar soil to promote insurgency against India, India decided to adopt a very realistic and pragmatic policy towards Myanmar. Apart from China's role in fueling insurgency through Myanmar, India had several other strategic interests in Myanmar. For example, India shares a long border with Myanmar, and this porous border is very susceptible for various border crimes, including drug trafficking, arms trafficking, wildlife trafficking, etc. And the fact that Myanmar is a hub for organized crime, since it's part of the Golden Triangle region, drove India to prioritize border security and adopt a very pragmatic policy with Myanmar's military for its own strategic reasons. Then of late, under India's Look East Act East policy, Myanmar has become critical for India for connectivity with Southeast Asia. Because literally, Myanmar acts as a land bridge for connecting India with Southeast Asia, and we have several important connectivity projects that are going on, such as the IMT Trilateral Highway project that connects India with Myanmar and Thailand, and as well as the Kaladan Multimodal project. So keeping all these strategic factors in mind, India has always adopted a very pragmatic, realistic policy towards Myanmar. And this can be seen in the current context as well, because even as Western criticism against Myanmar mounts, India has chosen to attend a military parade in Myanmar, and India's defense representative at the Indian Embassy in Myanmar has attended the parade. 8 countries, which are seen to have close ties with Myanmar's military, have chosen to participate in this military parade, and this includes Russia, China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Laos, and Thailand. Considering this, India cannot afford to be left behind, and hence, India also has chosen to participate. And in the last couple of months, India has carefully avoided any direct criticism of Myanmar's military, despite the ongoing bloodbath in the country. Now let's take up a couple of mains practice questions. The first question: the controversy surrounding COVID-19 vaccines shows that in research and development, logistics, transparency, and communication are also equally important. Critically evaluate. The second question: in societies around the world, menstruation is seen as a taboo. Hence, it's important to start considering the abhorrent practices to be discriminating against menstruating women as abnormal practices. Critically discuss. Kindly write an answer to these questions and post your answers in the comment section below. So, this concludes our discussion for today. Thanks for watching.